We thought the Phoenix Suns were done. 15 roster spots. Over. No more. Are they? On today's episode of Locked On Suns, we'll attempt to answer that question. Let's go.
You are Locked On Suns, your daily Phoenix Suns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We are back. This is Locked On Phoenix Suns. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, and I'm your host, Brendon Kleen, a credentialed media member covering the Suns for the past 6 seasons, a writer at Suns.com, and the host of the Just Basketball Show. Wherever you get your podcast, a big thanks for making Locked On Suns your first listen. Happy 4th of July. Happy Independence Day. Maybe you're grilling, maybe you're swimming, maybe you're doing none of that, hanging out alone. Maybe you're working. Either way, we appreciate having you. Hit follow or subscribe. Just search Locked On Suns wherever you get podcasts, including YouTube. We're free and available every single day. So become an everydayer. Get locked on to the Phoenix Suns every single day throughout the offseason and beyond by hitting follow, hitting subscribe, and getting on the bandwagon in the community. 5,000 strong. A big thank you to all of you. But we have a lot to get to, so enough of that. Let's go. Isaiah Todd, Wainright, Toumani Camara. That is where we are in terms of names with this roster right now, because the Suns knocked the rest of it out of the park. But that does not mean that there's not still more interesting stuff to discuss. Today's show is brought to you by Prize Picks. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code LOCKEDON. That's prizepicks.com, promo code LOCKEDON. More from them later on in the show, but let's get to it. Toumani Camara got his full NBA contract this week. And I'm going to emphasize the important part of that, which is full NBA contract. All right? Not a two-way, which is what I had assumed. No matter who the Suns picked. We thought it might be Emoni Bates. We thought it might be any number of people. It ended up being Toumani Camara, and I thought that would be a player that got a two-way contract. The NBA now allows you to have 3 of those, and it just made sense to me that odds are, whoever you're picking at 52, unlikely to be a difference maker, right? Unlikely to be somebody that you want to commit to immediately. And we don't know how long this contract is. There are some things that teams often do with these second rounders in order to get guys, pay them a little more, although the Suns can't really do that, or extend the contract out for longer in order to mess with the restricted versus unrestricted. There might be something going on there, or maybe the Suns are just that sold on the ability of this guy to come out and compete right away. I did dive into the write-up that Sam Vecini of The Athletic had in his draft guide, which is always incredibly, incredibly thorough, and I mean, nobody does it better than that guy. I'll actually be mentioning Sam's scouting later on in this segment as well, but he basically said that Camara is somebody who, if the shooting progress in his senior year at Dayton is real, could legitimately impact winning in the NBA right away. That is a very exciting thing to hear, but if his shooting pans out is a thing you could say about a lot of NBA players, so I'm not positive, but that is where the Suns are. I'm super thrilled to watch the dude in Summer League. I'm honestly really excited for this Summer League. We'll see what happens. Isaiah Todd is where we go next, and he is the guy, if you forgot, who was in G League Ignite, was an early second-round pick 3 years ago, and then came over from Washington in the Beal trade a couple weeks ago. Somehow it was only a couple weeks ago that Bradley Beal got here. Crazy. His contract is guaranteed, all right, for this year. It's non-guaranteed in the future and everything, but some of these other moves, including Camara, including the way that the Suns so quickly filled out their roster with veterans, and one other thing I'm about to talk about, indicate to me that he's not a lock to be on the roster. So let me tell you the other thing I'm about to talk about, rather than referencing it halfway like that. Wainright. He had his option picked up, which you remember, and I mistakenly have been treating that as a guarantee that he will be on this roster, and I don't think that's necessarily the right way to look at this. His contract is not fully guaranteed until January 10th. I would imagine something like half of it became guaranteed when the Suns exercised that option, or sometime in late June. is typically when that stuff will happen. So, that got him close to $1 million, but the rest of it doesn't go into guarantee until, again, January 10th, midway through the year, more than midway through the year. So the Suns could cut him in training camp, for instance, and not have to pay him any more money. That is interesting. That would allow them some flexibility to add another player, right? Isaiah Todd, again, his contract is guaranteed, but it's a very small minimum deal because he is so young, and so really it's something where I think Ish is actually the same amount. You could just cut him, eat the salary, and re-sign somebody else. The NBA allows you to do that without much of a problem because it's the lowest possible salary you're able to pay anyway. We know that they're continuing to host veterans in workouts. Darren Collison's name got thrown out there today by Chris Haynes, and allegedly there was the workout last week or the week before with Jabari Parker, Quindary Weatherspoon, Stanley Johnson, etc. I don't know if that happened, if I'm being completely honest. I'm not sure. We know that free agents I don't love these names, but in addition to the guys that they've worked out on the actual free agent market, if you just go to the lists of best available and whatnot that are out there this time of year, Hamidou Diallo, a young guy who went through Oklahoma City and now is in Detroit. Three-point shot has slowly developed. He's a freak athlete. Maybe. Terrence Davis, Rodney Magruder, whoever, take your pick. Two of the names I've said have some background issues, let's say, that might withhold some of the teams from signing them. But that's neither here nor there. It's just worth considering. My most likely guess, before we get into the bigger things that could still be on the table, campaign trade, Deandre Ayton trade, traded player exception, I didn't want to start with that because I don't think it's super realistic. And so my most realistic pathway forward for Phoenix, if I'm being honest and, again, realistic, is that they're going to use Summer League to not only get a look, and I'll even throw Jordan Goodwin on this list. I mean, his shot is not where you want it to be, right? And so I would think he's a decent likelihood to be on this roster opening night, but things change and the Suns want to win a championship. If Jordan Goodwin's contract is standing between them and doing that, they will cut him and they will sign somebody new. The Suns don't have the opportunity to use buyouts anymore because they're in that second apron threshold. So next year, around February, March, April, when guys get picked up there, I think March 31st is the deadline, the Suns will not be in on that. So this is their time. But again, to return to what I was saying, I think that they will use Summer League to get a look at Goodwin, Todd, Camara, for sure, who are all on the roster. That has been released already. We know that. And then the three names that I'm most interested in, although obviously we haven't watched these guys yet, and I'm just basing a lot of this on stats and what other people say, are Keanu Pinder, who played with Ayton at U of A. And here's the second Sam Vecini plug. He was well liked by Sam Vecini, who tweeted about the addition to the Summer League roster at the time. Seems very similar to Toumani Camara, honestly, to me. Pinder does, just a big forward who can play some defense and seems to be kind of just an impact player who doesn't have to have the ball but can make a difference. Seems like somebody Frank Vogel could use on the defensive end. And then the two of the foreign guys, Louis Olinde, who is a shooting forward who has some defensive playmaking chops and just an efficient scorer. The past 2 full seasons overseas has really shot the ball well. And Hunter Hale, a guard who can also shoot the lights out. And then maybe if none of the Summer League guys pop, you see which veterans remain on the market by late September. There's always people who slip between the cracks. Last year it was, Dennis Schroeder. He's not out there anymore. He got his bag from Toronto, but maybe there's somebody else this time. Let's think bigger, though. That's realistic. That's where I want you guys to maybe turn the rational part of your brain off, and we'll have a little more fun in the next segment. Campaign Deandre Ayton, the traded player exception that the Suns still have from the Saric Bazley deal. Let's get crazy. First, a word from Prize Picks. Prize Picks has come in and they fixed daily fantasy sports. They made it fun. They made it winnable because you're not playing against sharks. You're not playing against somebody in your league who's just spending all day every day or has some sort of advantage that you don't have. They have a subscription somewhere. No, it is you versus Prize Picks' projections. That is it. More or less. I'm going to the Diamondbacks game on 4th of July. I know I'm wearing a Padres hat. Just deal with it. Maybe I'm going to go with more on Lourdes Gurriel hits because he had that all-star bid and maybe he's feeling good. Or maybe I'm going to go, I don't even know who's pitching. Maybe I'm going to go less on strikeouts because the Diamondbacks offense tends to do pretty well. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. They offer projections across all sports, not just baseball. Men's and women's basketball, tennis, golf, whatever you love, they're going to have lines there for you. Those projections, safe and fast withdrawals, operational in 30 states, including Arizona as well as Canada. Big part. Go to prizepicks.com or download the PrizePicks app and use the promo code LOCKEDON to get 100% instant deposit match up to $100. Meaning, if you deposit $100, PrizePicks matches that right back into $100, right back with $100 straight into your account. So don't forget to enter that promo code LOCKEDON at sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100. Let's keep it rolling. Cameron Payne. I'm going to talk about Eric Gordon later in the show to close things out, but I think that there is a reasonable case to be made that if you believe in Jordan Goodwin especially, and you think that Eric Gordon is somebody who the Suns can rely on, especially in the regular season, in his mid-30s, that Payne becomes even more expendable than he already may have been. His contract was non-guaranteed and the Suns decided to guarantee it, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they want him. It's just more an indication, are we going to get a better player than that on the market? I think the answer was probably no. I am always a little higher, I think, on Payne than most people are. I think his streakiness is the biggest issue with him, but when he's on, he is a legitimate shot creator for himself and for his teammates. He is a good transition player. He at least rotates well on defense, even though he is undersized. And he's played with Booker. He's played with Ayton. There is something to be said for that, even though continuity is not going to be important for this Suns team. It still matters, right? So maybe they just keep him. But I do also think he has value around the league, especially for teams that need guards. I don't have a lot of ideas, and so that's why I'm a little negative on this one, because what you have to remember with a Cameron Payne trade is that the Suns have literally nothing. You know, pull out the Rob Lowe from Parks and Rec for any of you who have watched that show. Literally nothing. They don't have a second-round pick to trade. They don't have a first-round pick to trade, and they don't have other players, right? I mean, like, maybe he could go in a Deandre Ayton trade, but okay, so the Suns actually, yeah, this is not updated with the Wizards after the Beal trade. Yeah, these things are all screwed up. Okay, nobody has the Wizards stuff because I think maybe the trade has not been finalized and nobody knows. But let's assume that they do not have any picks. So they don't have any other stuff to add, right? So here's the deal. Let me get right down to the bottom of it now that I've meandered my way through this plenty. Memphis, Cleveland. Those are the two that I came up with for Cameron Payne destinations. Memphis, there's a few that they could go. Maybe Xavier Tillman, their backup big man who had a nice moment against Anthony Davis in that Lakers series in the playoffs. But I think that they're going to want to have him on the roster because Brandon Clark is hurt. So probably not. John Conchar is maybe the more likely option. A big wing who just plays smart basketball, plays steady basketball, and rebounds really well, which has always been one of the funny things about him, and just shoots well. I mean, that's it. He's just an option, similar to, let's say, you know, maybe not quite the shooter that Watanabe is, but close, you know, someone in that mix. Is that more valuable than what Payne might provide this team or less? Up to you to decide. I like the idea of getting a little more of a wing and a forward in here, but more so of a wing because the Suns have Watanabe, who's 6'9", Keita Bates-Diop, who's 6'8", 6'9", obviously Durant. But as far as like legitimate sort of threes, they don't really have anybody. I mean, you know, like Eric Gordon, I guess, can play a little bit of that. We know Booker can defend some of those guys. Okogie, of course, but even he's undersized, all things considered. So Conchar would just be a guy there. Cleveland, Dean Wade. He is actually a weird thing where you don't think of him as an athlete, and he's had injury issues, and yet defensively the numbers always show he's been an impactful guy. If he could just take threes and make threes and be a good team defender, he is fairly young. He is on a salary beyond this year, so that continues to be a trade asset. Seems like a decent buy low candidate. The co-host of the Just Basketball show with me covers the Cavs. He is also the host of Locked On Cavs, Chris Manning, and he told me doesn't hate the idea. The Cavs really need a backup point guard. Ricky Rubio is kind of all they have there, but he's coming off an injury and just obviously is older now. So interesting possibilities there. Maybe there's others. There's just not a lot of teams that need guard depth right now, especially after all of free agency is kind of already played out. But Payne would be serviceable for anybody who ended up needing that. Maybe there's an injury before camp. I don't know, but that's kind of where we are. I waited 15 minutes. If you're still here, I love you. You're an everydayer most likely, and you're getting the gift of more Deandre Ayton trade talk. I just cannot let go of the possibility when you continue to hear Dallas as a possibility for Pascal Siakam. They have still not used their mid-level exception, and somehow they went into the offseason obviously needing to re-sign Kyrie Irving, but probably number two most important thing to be doing for them was to get a center that they liked, a playable big man, and somehow they added two of those and still have zero of them. Is that fair to say? They drafted Derek Lively, who I just don't think anyone should expect to be ready in year one as a 19-year-old on a team wanting to compete for a championship, and Richaun Holmes, who barely played last year and has some baggage attached to him in his personal life and has never been a good defender. So is he your guy? Probably not in terms of a closing center. They have Maxi Kleber as a small ball option, so really they have five centers, but really maybe more like just two between Dwight Powell and Maxi Kleber, which is exactly what they ended last season with. Not ideal. So with all of that said, them not having a lot of the flexibility left at this point, maybe some of their options that they might have been targeting now off the board, and the need still there for a center. I could see a world in which if they strike out with somebody on the mid-level, if they don't want to bring Christian Wood back, who would be a fifth center that still doesn't solve their problem, could they come groveling back to the Suns and say, let's reconsider an Ayton trade? Now, a lot of this is still not going to be great. It probably involves the Suns taking on Holmes or McGee. JaVale McGee, remember him? Yes. Maybe this goes into the season and somebody like Powell becomes available. I don't love the idea personally of, going into a finals, a championship run that the Suns hope to have with Drew Eubanks, Chimezie Metu, Dwight Powell, or Richaun Holmes, or JaVale McGee as your starting center. But there is a potential here. I don't think that the Mavericks are going to trade Maxi Kleber in a trade like that. He is a flexible piece. He is cost-controlled, and he is a valuable player for them. I just don't see it. But could you come away with Josh Green, who local basketball fans will know as the guy who went to U of A and broke out for Dallas last year? They have to pay him next summer. They just signed Dante Exum back into the league. Similar type of player. And they drafted Olivier Maxwell Prosper or whatever. Omax is what they call him. And Jaden Hardy last year, who both also are similar players to what Josh Green provides. If they get into a mode of desperation, could they flip what was the JaVale McGee slot in their offer to Josh Green, which would present an offer something along the lines of Richaun Holmes, Tim Hardaway Jr., and Josh Green for DeAndre Ayton? Your mileage is going to vary on that. Dallas just doesn't have a lot to offer. But if Holmes could at least be a rotation big man for you, Tim Hardaway Jr., take him or leave him. I believe he's an expiring salary after this year. Even if he's not, whatever. The salary is basically 1-to-1 for Ayton in this case, so it doesn't super matter here. I'm not positive if this trade is legal under the 100% matching thing that the Suns have to deal with, so maybe there has to be a different approach in terms of who these guys are. But Josh Green is somebody who I legitimately do think could start for the Suns. That might be enough for me to get it over the hump. Somebody who's still young, who is good enough to start games for you, and that you could pay into the future. I think that would be enough to at least make me reconsider it if I felt okay about my center spot. Also, traded player exception still out there for the Suns. If they really wanted to, I don't think it's necessary. Daniel House is somebody I've talked about a bunch. I think he's less needed now that they got Gordon and Watanabe and Bates Diop and those guys. I don't love it anymore. Payton Pritchard is out there. Emmanuel Quickly. Some of these names that fit into that are still out there, but these are guys that why would the team just, if with the traded player exception, the Suns are literally just absorbing the salary. That's it. That's all they're doing because once again, they do not have the trade flexibility to do anything else. So why would a team like Boston, who has a good player on their hands in Payton Pritchard, just dump him? I don't see it. Emmanuel Quickly, same thing. So I don't think that TPE is going to be used, at least not now. The Suns have all the way to the deadline next year to use it. Maybe something comes up. Maybe that's their fill-in for a buyout player. We'll see. The last note here is if you're talking about a Payne trade or an Ayton trade or anything else, now that Camara and the email actually came through, the press release from the Suns came through just now confirming that he has signed his contract. Toumani Camara can now not be traded for 30 days now that deal's been signed. All right. So he's one guy who maybe next summer or at the trade deadline, yeah, maybe if he starts to show something and actually plays at times and looks decent, maybe he becomes another little chip for the Suns. I don't think that's going to happen this summer. And again, can't happen for 30 days. Let's wander down the memory lane together. One more reason why the Eric Gordon acquisition by Phoenix is poetic justice for the Suns. More on what I mean by that after a quick break. Closing out the show, poetic justice is not just a Tupac movie or a Kendrick Lamar song. It is also something that can be used to describe EG to PHX. All right, let me tell you what I mean. So obviously we know that Gordon was drafted by the Clippers, has this weird history and connection with Chris Paul because he went to the Hornets in the Chris Paul trade. Major knee injury during the lockout season. Becomes a free agent after that, and the Suns signed him to a max offer sheet in 2012. The meme that will live forever in infamy. Then eventually makes his way to Houston after signing there and plays with Chris Paul. Which, of course, you remember. The team that got as close to beating the Warriors as anyone in the West, right? Gordon was a starter on those teams, and honestly, one of my favorite role player performances ever. Just his switchable defense, just green light of all green lights as a shooter, deep range. I loved Garrett Gordon in those days. I'm honestly psyched to watch the dude play this year for that reason. But the funniest part, the craziest part, the most satisfying part, if you're the type of person who enjoys screwing over other teams in addition to having moves go down that benefit your own team, I just kind of think the Clippers are just a little obnoxious. Let me just say that. I want to believe in the Clippers, but it is sort of funny how with endless pockets and all this stuff, they have now walked themselves into a corner where they have a bunch of old guys who no one wants, and they're cutting salary because they simultaneously they can't pay into infinity, and they don't have enough roster spots. So what they ended up doing at the deadline this past year, which is how Gordon ended up on the Clippers when the Suns ultimately played them in the first round, is they traded Luke Kennard in a first-round swap for Gordon. They also traded John Wall in that deal, but that didn't matter. The first-round pick swap was between... So Houston was obviously the team trading, but they had the Bucks pick from I don't know what deal. So the Clippers ended up getting the Bucks pick at 30 because they had the best record in the NBA. The Rockets with the swap ended up with the 20th pick, which is the Clippers' actual pick. So that's a 10-spot difference just to get one half season of Eric Gordon, which we'll get to the half season part in a second. But the funniest, craziest part of that whole thing, because that's a reasonable trade. Yes, Luke Kennard is younger, but he's much worse defensively, and we knew the Kennard thing in LA had just run its course. Like, he wasn't playing. So, reasonable trade, all things considered, until you get to what's now happened in the summer, which is that 20th pick that they got via the swap, Houston used on Cam Whitmore, the guy who fell. Yes, the player who fell all the way to 20, who Houston was celebrated for pulling the trigger on. Finally, you hear now that his college coach wasn't pumping him up very much in the pre-draft, and there was obviously injury stuff and everything else, red flags. But to get him at 20, I think the Rockets made a smart move there, and that was the pick that the Clippers gave up for Whitmore. Or for Gordon. Now, I'm not saying the Clippers would have taken Whitmore. I don't know, but it is just funny to get maybe the best talent value in the whole draft back in that trade. It just makes it that much more crazy. Then, obviously, this past weekend, the Clippers cut Eric Gordon simply for salary relief. Again, even the Clippers can't pay for everything at all times. Now, they eventually get KJ Martin, who's a solid young player. Maybe that's part of what you think of as what they recouped for cutting Gordon. But $20 million that they just cut off their books because it was non-guaranteed and they wanted to get some relief on their tax bill. But a lot of that is also because they couldn't dump some of those older veteran guys who make middling money onto other teams. We know that they tried to trade Marcus Morris in the Brogdon deal. They didn't end up being able to do that because they didn't want to bring Brogdon on with the injury history. Covington barely plays and probably doesn't have a lot of trade value as a result because a lot of teams are probably wondering what's up with that dude. And then Nicholas Batum, who we know is a solid player, but again, what team is giving stuff up for him in his mid-30s with, a fairly limited skill set at this point without that athleticism anymore? So because they couldn't dump those guys, they cut Gordon. So for all intents and purposes, again, they traded the salary and trade chip of Luke Kennard, a first-round pick swap that became Cam Whitmore, for Eric Gordon for 20 games and a first-round playoff loss. Ouch. Not great. It just adds more around the hilarity, the full circle, the serendipity of Gordon arriving in the Valley. I'm really excited I'm sure that he's going to have a lot of positive things to say. People have pointed out that he already changed his Instagram bio to Phoenix Suns guard, and that contract's not even official yet, which means that dude was ready for this. He obviously liked the Valley once upon a time in 2012, and he chose to take a pay cut to come here. Like, I'm sure he could have gotten, like I just talked about the Mavs with their mid-level exception. I'm sure he could have gotten $12 million from the Mavs to go play a role there. I mean, I'm not positive that offer was out there. It's not like I have Mavs sources, but I can't imagine it wouldn't have been there, at least a portion of it, more than $3 million, which is what he's making now, right? So it's just a cool little chapter that he's coming here in the first place and getting to kind of screw over and turn the knife in the wound of whatever the Clippers are up to right now with a bunch of injured old dudes and not a lot of promise for the future. And they just lost to the Suns with Gordon on the team. It's just satisfying. It's satisfying. I don't know if that's just me being a jerk, but there you have it. That will wrap us up for the day. More to come, I'm sure. Might be some trades to react to around the NBA before long. Does James Harden make the Clippers better than the Suns? I don't know. Hit follow, hit subscribe to find out and get all of your offseason content through Summer League and beyond here on Locked On Suns. I will catch you guys tomorrow.